The Galactic Combat Academy floated in the darkness of space like a metal moon. It was old, 300 years old. Thousands of soldiers had trained here, learned to fight here, and sometimes died here. The Academy accepted only the best warriors from across 40 different alien species. Its graduates became legends. Its failures became memories. Commander walked through the arrival hall with his claws clicking against the floor. He was a reptilian species known for their strength and their pride. His scales shimmered between green and gold as he moved, and his yellow eyes missed nothing. He had trained warriors for over 60 years. He had seen every species. He had broken every species. That was his job, and he was very good at it. Today was intake day. New cadets were arriving from across the galaxy. Watch them file through the doors. First came the tall and muscular with gray skin and teeth designed for tearing meat. They were predators from a death world, and they moved like hunters even when they were standing still. Behind them came the shorter but covered in natural armor that could stop most weapons. Their shells were thick and brown, and their forearms ended in hands that could crush metal. Then came the floating slightly above the ground. They had no legs, just long robes that hid whatever was beneath. Their faces were smooth and pale, with large, dark eyes that seemed to look through everything. They were psychics. They could read emotions and sometimes thoughts, never liked having them around. And finally, at the back of the line, came the humans. There were 4 of them. They looked small and soft compared to the other species. No claws, no armor, no fangs. They walked on 2 legs and had thin skin that showed their blood vessels beneath, had read their species file. Humans came from a small planet called Earth. They had only recently joined the Galactic Confederacy, and this was the first year they were allowed to send cadets to the Academy. Did not want them here. Nobody wanted them here, but politics demanded their presence, so here they were. He looked at his data pad and read their names. Male, 25 years old, former firefighter. Han, female, 24 years old, background in communications. Male, 26 years old, studied architecture. And Park, female, 23 years old, graduate student in environmental engineering. Stopped reading. Environmental engineering, not military training, not combat experience, not even basic self-defense. The human government had sent him a student who studied dirt and water systems. He looked up and found her in the crowd. She was small, even for a human, maybe 165 centimeters tall. Her black hair was tied back and her dark eyes were moving constantly, looking at everything around her. She was watching the walls, the ceiling, the other cadets, the doors. She was taking mental notes, realized, but notes about what? The new cadets assembled in the main hall, walked to the front and stood on the raised platform so everyone could see him. His voice was deep and carried easily across the room. "Welcome to the Galactic Combat Academy," he said. "Many of you will not finish this program. Some of you will wash out in the first week. Some of you will be injured. A few of you might die. This is not a school. This is a forge. We take raw material and we hammer it into weapons. If you cannot become a weapon, you will be discarded." He let his eyes move across the crowd. The stood tall and confident. The looked bored, as if they had heard this speech before. The were impossible to read. And the humans stood together in a small group, looking very aware of how different they were from everyone else. "Each species has natural advantages," continued. "They have speed and strength and claws that can cut through steel. They have armor that can survive explosions. They have minds that can break lesser beings without touching them. These are gifts from evolution. These are weapons you were born with." He pointed at the humans. "Humans have nothing." The room was silent. The humans did not react. They just stood there, watching him with those strange, soft eyes. "You have no claws," said. "No armor, no venom, no psychic abilities. Your bodies are fragile. You are short. You are, by every measure, the weakest species ever admitted to this academy. I want you to understand this clearly. You are here because of politics, not because of ability. I do not expect you to succeed. I barely expect you to survive." The firefighter shifted slightly but said nothing. Han kept her face perfectly neutral, looked at the floor, but Park did something strange. She smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but saw it and it irritated him deeply. "Something amusing, Cadet Park?" he asked. "No, Commander," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. "I was just thinking about what you said, about natural advantages." "And humans do have one, sir, but it is not physical." Crossed his arms. "Explain." "We adapt, Commander. Put us in a desert and we learn to find water. Put us in a frozen wasteland and we learn to build shelter. Put us in space and we learn to build ships. Our advantage is not in our bodies. It is in how we see problems." "Pretty words," said, "but words will not stop us from tearing out your throat." "No, sir," agreed, "but understanding the might." A low growl came from somewhere in the group, held up a hand to silence it. "We will see, Cadet Park. We will see how well your understanding serves you when you face real combat." He turned away from her. "Training begins tomorrow at dawn. You will be assigned quarters. You will follow all rules. You will respect your instructors. And you will learn very quickly that this galaxy does not care about your potential. It only cares about results." The cadets were dismissed. They filed out of the hall in groups, species staying with species. The humans walked together, speaking quietly among themselves. Watched them go. He noticed that Park was the last to leave. She stopped at the door and looked back at the hall. Her eyes moved across the room one more time, taking in every detail. Then she nodded to herself, as if confirming something, and walked out. Did not know what she was looking for, but something about that look, that careful observation, made his scales itch with unease. He shook it off. She was just a human. A small, soft, fragile human with no combat training and no natural weapons. What possible threat could she be? 6 weeks passed at the academy. The training was brutal. Every day began before sunrise and ended long after dark. The cadets ran, climbed, fought, and studied until their bodies screamed for rest. Many washed out. 3 quit in the second week. Suffered a mental breakdown during psychic combat training. 2 were sent home after injuring each other too badly during a sparring match. But the humans were still there. This surprised everyone, including Commander. He had expected them to fail immediately. Instead, they kept passing their examinations. Not with high scores, but they passed. Showed unexpected endurance during physical training. His years as a firefighter had taught him how to push through pain and exhaustion. Han made friends with cadets from every species, learning their languages and customs with remarkable speed. Spent his free time studying the station's layout, memorizing every corridor and maintenance tunnel. And Park continued to be strange. She did not fight well. Her combat scores were among the lowest in her class. She was too small, too slow, and too weak to compete with the other species. But she kept passing the survival examinations in ways that nobody could explain. During the flooding chamber test, cadets were trapped in a room that slowly filled with water. They had to find a way to escape before drowning. Most cadets tried to break down the door or climb to higher ground. Did neither. She studied the room's construction, calculated the water pressure at different depths, and found a weak point in the drainage system. She redirected the water flow and drained the room in half the expected time. During the hunting exercise, cadets were released into a cave system while training drones searched for them. The drones had heat sensors and motion detectors. Most cadets tried to hide or run, collected mineral deposits from the cave walls, and used them to create a paste that disrupted the drone's sensors. She walked past 6 drones without being detected. Commander reviewed her performance reports with growing frustration. She was not learning combat. She was avoiding it entirely. She was finding ways around every challenge instead of facing it directly. This was not what the academy taught. This was not what warriors did. He decided to force her into his way of thinking. He scheduled a mandatory tactical lecture for all cadets. The subject was improvised combat, using the environment as a weapon when standard tools were not available. It was a lesson designed to show the humans that even environmental awareness required physical strength to be useful. The lecture hall was large and circular, with seats rising in tiers around a central platform. Stood at the podium with his notes arranged before him. He had printed them on paper, a habit from his younger years when data pads were less reliable. Old habits died hard. The cadets filed in and took their seats. The human sat together in the middle section, was in the front row, her eyes already moving across the room, studying everything. Began his lecture. All species develop signature weapons, he said, his voice filling the hall. This is the nature of evolution. They have their claws and their speed. They have their armor and their strength. They have their psychic abilities. Even the weakest species develop something to help them survive. He paused and looked at the humans. Humans have developed tools. Your entire civilization is built on creating external weapons because you have no internal ones. This is not shameful. It is simply fact. But tools can be lost. Weapons can be taken. And when you find yourself without your technology, you must learn to see your environment as your weapon. He gestured around the room. Look at this hall. Most of you see chairs, walls, light fixtures, a podium, but a trained warrior sees weapons. The chair can be broken and used as a club. The light fixtures can be torn down and used to blind or burn. The walls provide cover. Even the air itself can be used if you know how to manipulate pressure and temperature. He activated a holographic display showing various tactical scenarios. Today's exercise will demonstrate how to identify and utilize environmental weapons in combat situations. We will begin with... A soft sound interrupted him, paper sliding against paper. Looked down. His lecture notes were gone from the podium. He looked up and saw Park holding them. She was sitting in the front row, her hands moving quickly, folding the papers with practiced precision. Cadet Park growled, "What are you doing?" "Listening to your lecture, Commander." Her fingers did not stop moving. "You said the environment is our weapon." "Those are my notes." "They are paper, sir. Cellulose fiber compressed into sheets. 11 pages, standard academy weight." She held up what she had created. In her hands were several small objects, each one folded into a sharp triangular shape. "In the 3 minutes since you began speaking, I have made 6 throwing weapons capable of cutting skin and penetrating soft tissue at distances up to 15 meters. The hall went silent. Every cadet was watching now. Was not finished. She held up 2 more objects, thin and flat with pointed ends. 2, suitable for most mechanical systems on this station. Then she raised her other hand, showing the final sheet of paper twisted into a tight, thin coil, and 1 garrote wire. Paper becomes surprisingly strong when twisted correctly. She looked up at Commander with calm, steady eyes. "Also, I have memorized your lecture notes. Would you like me to recite them?" The silence in the hall was absolute. 40 cadets from a dozen species stared at the small human female. She sat there holding weapons made from paper, weapons she had created while their instructor was still talking. Commander felt his scales flush dark with anger and something else, something that felt uncomfortably like fear. "You made weapons," he said slowly, "from paper." "From my environment, sir." Placed the objects on her desk, arranging them neatly. "As you instructed, you told us to see weapons where others see ordinary objects. I was simply applying your lesson." The lesson had not started yet. "With respect, Commander, you began teaching the moment you started speaking. I did not want to waste time." A sound came from the section. It might have been a laugh or a growl, silenced it with a look. He stared at Park for a long moment. She met his gaze without flinching. There was no arrogance in her expression, no mockery. She looked like a student who had simply completed an assignment. That made it worse. "Class dismissed," said quietly. "We will continue this lecture tomorrow." The cadets filed out, whispering among themselves. The story would spread across the entire station by nightfall. The human female had made weapons from the instructor's own notes before he finished his first sentence. Collected her paper weapons and walked toward the door. She paused beside who was waiting for her. "That was dangerous," he said in a low voice. "It was educational," she replied, "for everyone." They walked out together, leaving Commander alone in the empty lecture hall. He looked at the podium where his notes had been. Then he looked at the door where the human had disappeared. For the first time in 60 years of teaching, he did not know what to do next. The story of the paper weapon spread through Station 7 like fire through dry grass. By the next morning, every cadet and instructor on the station had heard some version of what happened in the lecture hall. The details changed with each telling. Some said had made 10 weapons. Others said 20. A few claimed she had somehow made a blade sharp enough to cut metal. The truth was strange enough without exaggeration. A human female, the weakest species in the academy, had turned a senior instructor's own notes into weapons while he was still speaking. She had done it calmly, quietly, and without breaking any rules. There was nothing in the academy regulations that said a cadet could not fold paper during a lecture. Commander did not find the situation amusing. He spent 2 days in his quarters, reviewing Park's file again and again. He watched recordings of her examinations. He studied her methods, and the more he learned, the more disturbed he became. She was not fighting. She was not even trying to fight. Every challenge she faced, she found a way to transform into something else. Combat became engineering. Survival became problem-solving. She was rewriting the rules of every test without technically breaking them. This could not continue. The academy existed to produce warriors, not thinkers. If Park graduated with her current methods, other humans would follow. The academy would become something different, something did not recognize. He decided to teach her, a lesson she would never forget. Training Chamber 9 was located in the lower levels of the station. It was a large, empty room with smooth metal walls, a single door, and powerful lights built into the ceiling. The room was designed for extreme testing scenarios. It could be flooded, heated, frozen, or filled with toxic gas depending on the exercise. But today had something simpler in mind. He summoned to the chamber at midnight when most of the station was asleep. Official records would show this as an unscheduled training exercise. Unofficial records would show nothing at all. When arrived, she found 3 cadets waiting inside. They were the largest of their species, each one standing over 2 meters tall with muscles visible beneath their gray skin. Their claws were extended. Their teeth were showing. Was in the observation deck above the chamber, watching through reinforced glass. He had followed when she left her quarters, sensing that something was wrong. Now he stood beside Commander, his hands pressed against the window. "This is murder," said. His voice was quiet but hard. "This is training," replied. "Cadet Park claims she can weaponize any environment. I am testing that claim." Below stood in the center of the chamber. She looked very small compared to the surrounding her. Her hands were empty. Her expression was calm. Activated the intercom. His voice echoed through the chamber. "Cadet Park, you have demonstrated creative thinking in controlled situations. Now we will see how you perform under real pressure. This chamber has been sanitized. There are no objects inside, no tools, no materials, nothing but air and your 3 opponents. You have 10 minutes to survive. Begin." The door sealed behind her with a heavy click. The largest, whose name was, stepped forward. His lips pulled back in a grin that showed all of his teeth. "Little human," he said, "no paper to save you now, no tricks, just you and us." Did not move. Her eyes were traveling across the room, looking at the walls, the floor, the ceiling. She was calculating something. Commander said the room was sanitized, she said. It is, replied. He said there were no objects. There are not. He is wrong, pointed upward at the ceiling. Those are standard Academy light panels, composite polymer housing, electromagnetic ballasts for power regulation, and ultraviolet sterilization bulbs, Class 4 intensity. They are used to keep training chambers clean between exercises. Looked up briefly, then back at her. So, what does that matter? Are ambush predators from a forest world. Your species evolved under heavy tree cover where sunlight rarely reached the ground. Your eyes are designed for low-light conditions. Large pupils, high sensitivity, excellent for hunting in shadows. Took another step toward her. Are you giving me a biology lesson before you die? I am explaining why this will hurt. Raised her voice so it would carry to the observation deck. The emergency override code for environmental systems is the same across all training chambers. It is in the Cadet Handbook, page 847. Standard Safety Protocol, Section C. In the observation deck, his eyes widened with understanding. He lunged for the control panel. Grabbed his arm. What are you doing? Following the rules, Commander. Pulled free and slammed his hand down on the emergency override. Every light in Training Chamber 9 activated at maximum intensity. The ultraviolet bulbs flared to full power. The room became blindingly, painfully bright. Radiation that was meant to kill bacteria flooded the chamber in quantities never intended for occupied spaces. They screamed. Their sensitive eyes, evolved for darkness, could not handle the sudden assault of light. They clawed at their faces, stumbling and falling as their vision burned away. Dropped to his knees, howling in pain. The other two collapsed beside him, their hands pressed over their eyes. Stood untouched in the center of the room. Human eyes were designed for bright sunlight. The light was uncomfortable but not damaging. She watched the writhe on the floor for a moment, then walked calmly to the sealed door. She knocked twice. Commander, I believe the exercise is complete. Her voice was polite, almost friendly. Also, your cadets will need medical attention, temporary ultraviolet blindness, recovery time approximately 6 hours. I would recommend optic analgesics for the pain. In the observation deck, Commander stood frozen. His scales had gone pale, a sign of deep shock among his species. He stared through the glass at the small human female standing amid 3 incapacitated predators. She had never touched them. She had never needed to. What are you? He whispered. Answered quietly. She is human, Commander. That is what humans do. We adapt. We find weaknesses. We use everything around us, including things you did not know were there. He paused. You should have read our history files more carefully. We have been doing this for a very long time. Below waited patiently by the door. She did not look angry or triumphant. She looked like someone who had simply solved a problem. Opened the door. Medical teams rushed past him to help stepped out of the chamber and stopped in front of the commander. Thank you for the training exercise, sir, she said. It was very educational. She walked away down the corridor, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Commander watched her go. For the first time in his long career, he understood what it felt like to be prey. The incident in Training Chamber 9 could not be hidden. 3 cadets had been hospitalized with temporary blindness. Medical records existed. Witnesses existed. And within hours, the Academy's Ethics Board had launched a formal investigation into Commander's actions. The investigation revealed everything. The midnight summons, the sealed chamber, the 3-against-1 scenario, the absence of proper documentation. Commander had broken multiple Academy regulations, and the evidence was impossible to deny. But the investigation also raised questions about Park. She had used emergency systems in a way they were never intended to be used. She had caused injury to fellow cadets. and she had demonstrated capabilities that made many people very uncomfortable. High Commander summoned both of them to her private chambers. Was the oldest and most respected member of her species at the Academy. She had served as High Commander for over 40 years. Her chambers were located at the top of the station, with windows that looked out at the stars. She floated behind a simple desk, her robes flowing around her like water. Her dark eyes watched, and as they entered, reading them, they could sense emotions, sometimes thoughts. Lying to was not just difficult, it was impossible. "Sit," she said. Her voice was soft but carried absolute authority. They sat in chairs facing her desk. Scales were pale, his face was calm. Let the silence stretch for a long moment, then she spoke. "Explain." Spoke first. His words came quickly, defensively. "The human cadet showed disrespect during my lecture. She undermined my authority in front of the entire class. I sought to teach her humility through controlled adversity. The situation was meant to be challenging, not dangerous. You sealed her in a room with 3 predators twice her size. It was a training exercise. There was no documentation, no medical team on standby, no safety protocols in place." His voice remained quiet. "You sought to hurt her, Commander, possibly to kill her. Do not lie to me, I can feel the truth." Said nothing, his scales flushed darker. Turn 2, and you, Cadet Park. You humiliated a senior instructor in his own lecture hall. You incapacitated 3 fellow cadets. You used emergency systems in unauthorized ways. What do you have to say? Consider the question carefully before answering. Permission to speak freely, High Commander. Granted. Commander's lecture was correct. The environment is a weapon, but he made an error in his thinking. He assumed the environment meant physical objects, chairs, rocks, pieces of metal, things you can hold in your hands. She paused. Humans do not think that way. How do humans think? To us, the environment includes everything: light, sound, temperature, air pressure, social structures, rules and regulations, the cadet handbook, the emergency protocols that someone wrote 30 years ago and forgot about. Information itself is part of the environment. She met's gaze directly. When Commander sealed me in that chamber, he believed he had created a controlled environment. He thought he knew all the variables. But there is no such thing as a controlled environment. Every space contains information. Every system has weaknesses. Humans are very good at finding them. Was silent for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice carried something I'd never heard from her before. It sounded like unease. The Galactic Confederacy's Intelligence Division has been studying human warfare for the past decade. They have analyzed your history, your tactics, your methods. Do you know what conclusion they reached? Neither nor responded. Humans should not be able to fight wars. You have no natural weapons. Your bodies are weak. You are short. By every scientific measure, you should be a prey species, something to be hunted and eaten by stronger creatures. She activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air between them. Images of human history, wars and battles and conflicts stretching back thousands of years. And yet, continued, you have never lost a war of extinction, not once in your entire history. Every species that has tried to eliminate humanity has itself been eliminated. Every environment you have entered, from burning deserts to frozen wastelands to the vacuum of space, you have survived. You have conquered. You have turned those environments into weapons against your enemies. She looked directly at. You did not win in that chamber because you are stronger than. You won because you think differently. You see weapons where others see walls. You see opportunities where others see obstacles. Yes, High Commander. That terrifies me, Cadet Park. Psychic presence flickered, a rare display of emotion. I have lived for 300 years. I have seen wars between empires. I have watched species rise and fall, but I am rarely terrified. You terrify me. did not look away. I do not mean to cause fear, High Commander. I only do what humans have always done. We survive, we adapt, we learn. And you never stop learning. Deactivated the holographic display. That is perhaps the most frightening thing of all. She turned to Commander. You are demoted to secondary instructor status. You will no longer teach advanced combat courses. Your actions were a violation of everything this academy stands for. Bowed his head. Yes, High Commander. As for you, Cadet Park, his dark eyes studied carefully. You will continue your training, but you will also begin additional instruction in ethics and restraint. Your abilities are dangerous. You must learn when not to use them. I understand, High Commander. I am not certain you do, floated slightly higher, her robes swirling around her. The Confederacy admitted humans because we believed you were harmless, a minor species with interesting potential but no real threat. We were wrong. We are still learning how wrong we were. She dismissed them with a wave of her hand. Return to your duties, both of you. And Cadet Park, remember this, the galaxy is watching you now. Everything you do reflects on your entire species. Choose your actions carefully. Stood and bowed respectfully. Thank you for your wisdom, High Commander. She walked out of the chamber, leaving behind to receive further reprimand. In the corridor outside was waiting for her. He had been packing nervously, unable to sit still. What happened? He asked. Are you expelled? No, started walking toward their quarters. I have been given additional ethics training. That is all. The High Commander is afraid of us. His voice was thoughtful. She said humans think differently, that we see weapons where others see walls. Walked beside her in silence for a moment. Is she right? Looked at the walls around them, at the lights, at the ventilation systems, at every system and structure that made up the station. Yes, she said quietly, she is absolutely right. 1 year had passed since the humans first arrived at the Galactic Combat Academy. The station had changed. The cadets had changed. The instructors had changed. Nothing was quite the same as it had been before. Graduation day arrived with ceremony and tradition. Flags from 40 species hung in the Great Hall. Music played from speakers built into the walls. Dignitaries from across the Confederacy had traveled far to witness the event. This was not unusual. Graduations always attracted important visitors. What was unusual was who they had come to see. Park stood in the front row of graduating cadets. She wore the same uniform as everyone else. She looked the same as she always had, small and quiet and unremarkable. Her combat scores had never risen above average. Her strength ratings remained the lowest ever recorded at the Academy. By every standard measure, she should have been an unremarkable graduate. She had finished with the highest overall marks in Academy history. The scoring system had never been designed for someone like her. Points were awarded for completing objectives, not for how you completed them. Had completed every objective she was given. She had simply done it in ways nobody expected. Ways that required the Academy to create new categories just to evaluate her methods. Commander watched from the back of the hall. He had been demoted but not removed from the Academy entirely. His new position involved teaching basic courses to first-year cadets. It was a humiliation, but he had accepted it. He had no choice. Over the past year, he had watched the human cadets with new eyes. What he saw disturbed him more than he could express. Had spent his year reorganizing the Academy's supply systems. He had identified inefficiencies that had existed for centuries and corrected them. On the surface, this seemed helpful, but had realized something else. Now understood exactly how supplies moved through the station. He knew which shipments were critical. He knew which storage areas were vulnerable. If he ever wanted to cripple the Academy's operations, he knew exactly where to strike. Han had made friends with cadets from every species. She had learned their languages, their customs, their fears, their secrets. She had built a network of relationships that spanned the entire station. She had never used this network for anything improper, but the network existed, and knew things about people that they thought were private. Had spent his year studying the station's architecture. He could now navigate every maintenance tunnel, every ventilation shaft, every forgotten corridor. He had created detailed maps of systems that most people did not even know existed. He had shared these maps with no one, but he had them. The humans had not been learning combat. They had been learning the environment. The entire academy, its systems, its people, its structures, had become their weapon. High Commander presided over the graduation ceremony. She called each cadet forward to receive their certification. Once name was announced, the hall fell silent. Everyone was watching. Walked to the platform with steady steps. She accepted her certification with a respectful bow. For a moment, she and looked at each other in silence. "You will return to Earth now?" asked. Her voice was quiet, meant only for a time, High Commander. Then I have been assigned to the Confederacy's Frontier Division. First contact scenarios. Preparing new environments. Smiled. It was the same small smile she had shown on her first day at the Academy. Something like that. "The galaxy will be watching you, Cadet Park. Remember that." "I always do, High Commander." Returned to her seat. The ceremony continued, but something had changed in the room. The other species looked at the human graduates differently now. There was respect in their eyes, and fear. After the ceremony, approached High Commander. He waited until they were alone before speaking. "High Commander, I have been thinking about what Cadet Park said last year, about humans seeing weapons where others see walls." "Yes. We welcomed them into our academy. We showed them our systems, our protocols, our weaknesses. We taught them everything about how we operate." He paused. "We have become their environment." Did not respond immediately. She watched through the window as the human graduates gathered together, laughing and talking. They looked so ordinary, so harmless. "Yes," she said finally, "we have." "Is that not dangerous?" "It is terrifying." His dark eyes reflected the stars outside. "But consider the alternative. If we had rejected them, they would have learned about us anyway. They would have studied us from a distance. They would have found our weaknesses without us ever knowing. At least this way, we can watch them in return." Can we really watch them?" Did not answer. They both knew the truth. Humans were very good at being watched without being seen, at blending in, at seeming harmless while they learned everything about you. Across the hall glanced back at them, just once. She met the High Commander's eyes and nodded, a gesture of respect, or perhaps acknowledgement. Then she turned and walked through the doors with her fellow humans, out into a galaxy that had just become very interesting. 3 months later, the Galactic Confederacy's official threat assessment for humanity was updated. The previous classification had been simple: minor species, limited threat potential. The new classification was a single word: environmental. No one in the intelligence division could quite explain what that meant. The word had been chosen by a senior analyst who had spent 6 months studying human history and tactics. When asked to justify the classification, she had written a single sentence in her report: "Humans do not fight their environment, they become it." The classification was approved without further discussion. The file was marked as ongoing, and somewhere in the galaxy, 4 human graduates began their new assignments. They went to new stations, new worlds, new environments. And they started learning. Park arrived at her first contact posting on a frontier station near unexplored space. Her commanding officer was a named who had heard the stories from the academy. He watched her carefully as she reported for duty. "I have read your file," he said. "You are the one who makes weapons from nothing." "That is an exaggeration, sir." Set down her bag and looked around the station. Her eyes moved across the walls, the systems, the structures. Already she was learning. Already she was adapting. "I simply use what is available. Everyone does." Not like you do. Considered this. Then she smiled that small, quiet smile. Perhaps not, sir, but they could learn. Anyone could learn. Humans are not special. We simply never stop looking. Never stop asking questions. Never stop finding new ways to solve old problems. She picked up her bag and walked toward her assigned quarters. At the door, she paused and looked back. You should not fear us, Commander. We are not your enemies. We are simply human, and this galaxy has so much to teach us. She disappeared inside, leaving alone with his thoughts. He looked around the station, at the walls, the lights, the ventilation systems, all the things he had never really noticed before. For the first time in his life, he wondered what else he was not seeing. And somewhere in the station, Park was already learning the answer.